The 42nd Fastnet Race started on the Royal Yacht Squadron line in Cowes on Monday, 25 hours later than scheduled. Spectators packed the shore, the water and even the air to watch the fleet of 271 boats start at lunchtime. On Saturday, Rourke took the unprecedented decision to postpone the scheduled Sunday start due to severe weather warnings. The decision surprised most, was welcomed by some, but had a lot of critics who saw it as setting a dangerous precedent. At the first start, the wind was blowing a friendly 15 knots from the southwest, but an hour later, at the end of the starting sequence, we were already seeing 25-knot gusts in the western Solent. First away were the 15 open 60s, with Hugo Boss making by far the best start on port tack at the inner end of the line. Hugo Boss stormed off down the Solent, surrounded by support boats, media boats and spectating ribs. Also racing were some famous names from the open 60 class, like the French boats Chamonix Pujolat and Generali, along with PRB. Shortly after the start, Generali sailed through the lee of Chamonix, clearly on a mission to catch Hugo Boss. Class 3 was next away with 69 entries. This fleet included a host of Sigma 38s and similar sized cruiser racers, who would face a tough race if the weather lived up to the forecast. This fleet was all clear at the start, and like most of the others, Class 3 favoured the inner end of the line, where the west-going stream was at its strongest. Most of the fleet came inshore off the green and short-tacked their way west, providing a great view for spectators on the shore up to Egypt Point. Iromigi, Jean-Yves Chateau's Nicholson 33, was out to repeat their overall race victory in 2005, but they'd face a strong challenge, not least from the weather. Class 2 also had 69 entries, and a large number pushed the line hard at the inner distance mark. Blackadder pushed too hard and was over early, but was trapped by boats both sides of her, as Bongani found space at the buoy and made the best start at the inner end. She then threw away her advantage by not being fully sheeted in, while boats to windward of her were up to speed and climbed out above her. Many were late at the inner end and then faced a difficult time short-tacking up the green, while those that had started a bit farther out came charging inshore on starboard. Class 2 included a real mix of designs, but the most numerous were the J109s and the J105s, some of which were sailing in the two-handed division. Class 1 had 71 entries, with a number of Reflex 38s, Prima 38s, First 40.7s and similar sized racer cruisers. They too favoured the inner end of the line, and once again there was an individual recall as some pushed the line too hard in the west-going tide. They were all eager to get away, and as they tacked in towards Egypt Point to stay in the strongest tide, there were a lot of calls for water and much dodging and weaving as the melee of boats struggled to find clear lanes. Those that could stayed close inshore around Egypt Point, tacking just off the beach to stay in the best current. All the crews were suited and booted, ready for a tough beat to windward as the breeze continued to build. Class 0 had 59 entries, ranging from the highest rated Class 40s down to the lowest rated First 44.7 Courier de Coeur. In between were a selection of Swan 45s, Far 45s and a number of First 47.7s. Also in this class was the pretty Coeur 50 Snow Lion. The breeze was picking up by this stage and crews were kept busy, working their way out of the crush of boats and avoiding the dangers of collision as the packed fleet headed west at the start of a 605-mile race. As with the classes ahead of them, those that were able to get close inshore were able to make gains. Out in front of the fleet with a clear lead after a cracking start was John Shepherd's Coeur 46 Fair Dues 7. The larger Coeur, Snow Lion, was also looking good and making up ground on the leader as they headed west. The Super Zero and Canting Keel division was the penultimate start at 12:40 and featured the much-awaited battle between the Supermaxes Alfa Romeo and Leopard. Most of these large boats wisely started further offshore, while at the inner end of the line, the 60-foot Loki and the Volvo 60 V project were both caught over early and had to return. Venom, another Volvo 60, made a good start at the inner end, while out with the big boys, the Far 52 Bear of Britain looked tiny alongside Alfa Romeo and Leopard. After returning to restart, Loki was carving her way back up the fleet, quickly overhauling Simon Lambert's Martin 18 Nimrod. The battle of the Super Maxes was one everyone wanted to see, and the water was churned to a froth as spectator boats followed the stars of the show, while a TV helicopter hovered below mast height to get the shot. Right from the off, Leopard and Alfa Romeo were at it hammer and tongs. Not to be outdone was Rambler, George David's fixed-keel 90-foot maxi, which was mixing it with the bigger pair, as these three led the charge west, short-tacking down the Solent. At this stage there was nothing in it, and the two giants made a great sight as they charged to windward at 15 knots, reaching the Needles in an hour. In their wake came the smaller boats in Super Zero, all of whom were hoping for a fast ride to the Rock and back to Plymouth. One boat that wouldn't make it out of the Solent was Nimrod, which tore its main off Thorness Bay and was forced to retire and head back to Cowes. 4 multihulls were entered, but only 2 made it to the start, with the Raider 302 catamaran Team Eberspacher leading off the line by a long way, before the Seacart 30 trimaran Cornwall playing for success got into her stride. These tiny boats were each sailing with 3 crew, and they must have been filled with trepidation at the thought of the forecast conditions. They chose opposite sides of the beat as Team Eberspacher headed for the island shore before tacking onto port to head down the Solent. On the mainland shore, the Seacart 30 trimaran was scorching along, flying her main hull at times and looking determined to catch many of the classes ahead of her before they reached the Needles. As the boats raced through Hurst Narrows at the exit to the Solent, swept west by the ebbing tide, they faced a hard beat before the wind increased and shifted to the south. As we completed this report, 118 boats had retired and were crowding into many ports along the south coast from Poole to Falmouth. Among the retirees was Alfa Romeo, but Rambler was leading Leopard as the pair raced across the Celtic Sea heading for the Fastnet Rock. Rambler was leading Super Zero while Courier de Corps was leading Zero. Class 1 was being led by TFS Philosophie 4, while Bongani was leading Class 2. In Class 3 it was Sunsail 56 that was in the lead, while PRB was leading the Open 60 class. Perhaps unsurprisingly, both of the little multihulls were among the retirees after heading into Plymouth.